this afternoon's workshop is going to be about kind of introductory penetration testing, and we're going to be doing this through a platform known as HackTheBox. Now, HackTheBox is a platform that gives you a lot of well, it's got a lot of things, but the labs we'll be focusing on are ones where they give you VPN access to a system where you can where the trick is you're on a network with a bunch of machines that are have some kind of vulnerability, and you need to try and exploit those vulnerabilities to get access to the computer and, as usual, get access to a flag in the root users directory or wherever it is, depending on the challenge. Now, in MonSec, the style of challenges and the style of learning we've been usually using to teach cybersecurity topics are something known as, we've been using CTFs, and they're great. They're a lot of fun, you learn a lot of stuff from them, but generally, some of the challenges you come across in CTFs are often quite contrived, arbitrary, and using stuff you wouldn't really see in the real world, to the point where it's not as practical to know CTF-style hacking. And so penetration testing in the actual wild is probably closest in reality to the style of pen testing, to the style of challenges that you'd see on HackTheBox. And other similar platforms that you might be familiar with are TryHackMe or VulnHub. They're also pretty good, but we'll be using TryHackMe. So we'll be using HackTheBox this afternoon. Now, if any of you, now we'll be using the platform Kali Linux, which I've got on a virtual machine. It's pretty much the operating system of choice for this kind of stuff. It comes with a whole bunch of tools installed, and because you're sending all your network through there, because you're using a VPN to send all your network traffic to them, it's probably worthwhile having a separate operating system just for this style of stuff. Now, so obviously the first thing you want to do is you'll want to go to HackTheBox, log in and everything. Now, I don't think, there used to be a challenge you had to solve to log in. I don't think that's the case to sign up, but I don't think that's the case anymore. Now, there are a lot of different styles of challenges on HackTheBox, a lot of different labs, a lot of different rooms and stuff, but we'll be focusing on the easiest of these, known as the starting point, mainly because I don't have a VIP subscription and it would be against terms of service to show walkthroughs of of any other ones, because these ones do come with walkthroughs with them. And so to connect to them, the first thing you need to do is you need to connect to their system. So if you go to here, there's a separate VPN file you need to download for the starting point labs, because they're on a different network. So once you download that, you'll be given, you can either use Pwnbox, which is like an online, a web-based Parrot Linux, which is similar to Kali Linux machine you can use to try hacking with them, but I personally recommend using Kali Linux and an OpenVPN file. So you download that. Personally, I ran into a few issues using the American starting point servers, so I think using the European ones is probably a bit better. I'm not sure what was causing that though. You probably get it to work fine. So you save that, and yep. And you'll get an OpenVPN file. Personally, I like to use Screen to run it in the background, so I don't have a terminal taking up all my space. So you just run sudo openvpn that, and that'll just set up. That'll start running, and that's connected. Now you can close that, and now you should see that I am connected to their network and can connect to their box. Now, I think I've already got this one active, but you might need to connect to this and click here to start the machine. And they give you an IP address here to use. Now, the first thing I usually like to do is I like to set the IP as an environment variable. So export IP equals this. Personally, I've got a script set up, so I can just echo this into, and that will just set it for me every time I open a shell. So for now, just echo IP, or if I ping the IP, that to verify whether I've got connection to it, and that works fine. Has anyone here got Kali Linux set up, or is anyone stuck on any points? Yeah. All right. Is anyone following along? Does anyone plan to follow along? Great. Well, I know Sam's following along. Yeah, great. Yep. All right, so does anyone know any of the tools or methodologies that you would use typically when you're starting off with a box like this? What you would do? You've got an IP address and you want to find out maybe what's running on it, what you can do with it. Yeah?
Two things. One, can you zoom in a little bit?
Oh, thank you.
And
yeah.
two, Nmap.
Nmap, great, yeah. Nmap's a command line program that you can use to scan an IP address and find open ports and running services. If you're not comfortable with the command line, which you probably should be, but if you're not, you can use Nmap as which is a GUI version, but I'm just going to use the... Great. What? Right, never mind. So the command you want to... So everyone's got their own preferences of how they type the commands. I'm just going to go Nmap-c for SV. So that telling me instead of, along with finding open ports, I also want you to kind of detect what the open version. Actually, you know what? Before I do that, I'm just going to run dash ports top port 500 to automatically check the 500 most common ports, dash VV to print them as they find them, and just let that run like that. Because what I usually like to do is I like to run a quick scan to try and find open ports, and then after that scan those specific ports in a more aggressive way. Oops, hang on, I forgot to actually specify the IP. So here's most ports. There's 445, 135, 139 and 1433. Now port 445, what's that again? Yeah, now port 445 is the port used for SMB. It stands for Server Message Block, and it's a protocol used for sharing files and resources between machines. And so maybe that could be the first thing we attack. Maybe there could be some kind of thing configured badly on it. Maybe there could be an exposed file or something, who knows. 135, 139, I'm trying to remember what they are. I think one of them is NetBIOS, which is for sharing credentials between machines in a workspace. I'm not certain, don't quote me on that. And 1433 is used for Microsoft SQL servers. And so we can access a file sharing service and a SQL server. Does anyone have any ideas what we should do next? Any preferences for what we should attack next? SQL one? That could work. Just to save time, I'm just going to tell you that you probably shouldn't attack that first. I mean, you probably could, but I just happen to already know that there are credentials for the SQL one that you need to know ahead of time, because SQL usually has passwords on it. I mean, to be fair, so does SMB, but I mean, if you want, you can definitely go and try SQL. If you don't know what to do, then attacking everything and seeing what you can get into and what you can't will be a good way. But just in the interest of time, I'm just going to let you know that SMB is the one you'd want to attack first. I mean, there's no reason I should know that other than the fact that I've already done this box. Like that is a very valid suggestion. And so the first thing you want to do, and so now in Kali Linux, there's a tool called Smb Client, which is a tool that lets you lets you communicate with SMB servers. So I'm just going to run Can everyone see that all right? Smb Client -n-l, and then // and then the IP. That should give us some information. Now the /n specifies no password, so I'm just going to assume that they've forgotten to put a password on it. If you were to do it without the -n, I believe, then it'll ask you for the workgroup's password. But you could try doing different passwords, but if you just press enter without entering a password, then you can still get in, because that is the first vulnerability here, that they've forgotten to set a password, which means that we can access these different share names, these different file systems. Now there's one called admin, that seems interesting. One called backups, that seems a bit interesting as well. This one doesn't have a comment associated with it. Now I think the first thing we want to do is try and connect to this machine and see what's inside it. So the way you do this is by doing the client -n. I'm not going to do /l because I want to remain kind of in this SMB thing and query it as I go instead of just listing all of it, because -l just lists all the files rather than actually interacting with it. So -n specify there's no password, and then // although I need 2 slashes for each because a / just cancels out the next character before it. So the IP and backups. Yep, and now I've got an SMB prompt. You can type help to look at all the commands, but there's a command one called dir, which is the Windows version of ls, and you can look at all the files here. And there's one interesting file here called prod.dtsconfig. And if you were to look this up, this is a configuration file for Microsoft SQL servers. And so you can probably tell that is maybe that's the thing you want to look at. There might be some juicy information in there that you could help you get into the SQL thing, and so I'm just going to get that. So I'll download that. And I've got that, yep. I want to put this all in the archetype folder just to keep things, hang on. That bit cheating, I don't want you to look at those yet. So now let's have a look at what's in this file. Now, there's a whole bunch of XML formatted configuration stuff. And if you have a look around, there's two things that might stand out. First of all, there's a user ID, which is the user. So this is the user in which the SQL server is set up with. And then the password here. Now, this password is what we can probably use to actually get into the SQL server. And so, but now to actually get into the SQL server, you need an SQL, Microsoft SQL client you can use to interact between your computer and the server. And if you have a look around, I think there are some tools installed in Kylie, or you can get the tools to work, but personally I found it was easiest just to, there's a tool called, what was it? Impact. Impact has a lot of tools in it, and we'll actually use a few of these tools throughout this box. But if you just download this one, the one called mssqlclient.py is the one we're going to use. It kind of has that protocol you can use to interact with it. I'm just going to clone that and get it going. And here you can see there's a whole bunch of very interesting programs that we can use. Well, first we've got to actually install it. Of course, this will go very, hang on. This will go pretty quickly because I've already installed it. I'm showing you the commands to run if you wanted to install this for yourself. And so the format to use here is to interact with this. You'd use Python 3 using SQL client, and we already know what actually I'm going to open up another terminal here so I can look at both things at once. You're right. I can slow down. Actually, yeah. I mean, just if you have any questions, just yell out at any point, because I don't know. It's hard to tell how fast or slow I'm going up here. And so we know that the user ID is archetype/SQL SVC. That's the user. And so if this client, the user, well, of course, we need to change this to a / because of Windows, and then at the IP. And we're going to be using Windows authentication, so it's Windows auth to log in. And there's a password, but as we've already leaked the configuration file, we can get the password from this file here. If we copy that there, we can log in, and now we've got access to their SQL shell, and so we can execute commands on the database which they are running. Now, I mean, in theory, if you wanted, you could have a look around here. In some scenarios, this would be the end goal. Maybe there's some interesting information on the database you could get out. But in our case, access to the database isn't enough. We want access to the actual files on the computer. We want to get like a root shell on the computer. And so there's a few interesting commands you can use here. First, let's find out whether the shell being executed on the SQL shell is being run by the system administrator. So if we do select SRV role member and then sysadmin, that will respond with 1, indicating that we currently do have administrator access. However, if you look at Xp configure, there's a thing we want to use here called Xp Cmd Shell, and this is an option in Microsoft SQL that lets you execute shell commands through the database. However, this is enabled, so we need to enable this. So the commands we use to type this are exec sp configure one. And in between each command, we need to type reconfigure. And then, now if we look at Xp configure, there are a lot more options presented, including Xp Cmd Shell. But as you can tell, it isn't currently enabled. And actually, yeah, so we need to enable this to be executed. So we do exec sp configure Xp Cmd Shell 1. Yeah, it's been changed from 0 to 1, which means that now, using the command Xp Cmd Shell, we can execute system commands. So let's try that out. Let's do Xp Cmd Shell, and then who am I? Hang on, what did I do? I've got to reconfigure. Yep. Yep, and you can see from typing QMI, it's printed out the user group. Yeah. Yeah. Any questions or is any? Oh, yeah, might be moving a bit fast then. Yeah, well, that's because Sam was holding my hand, helping me with this challenge before this stuff. Although I actually did solve it before him, so it's good. I don't know. Yeah. If anyone on Zoom, I think some of the audience members are having trouble actually connecting to it in the first place. Got access to the SQL shell on the box we're trying to get into. So, as I mentioned earlier, we've changed the settings to execute the command Xp Cmd Shell, so we can run random commands on here. Now, I believe this might be enough to solve one of the flags. Now, in this challenge, there are 2 flags you can get. And each of the flags is located in the desktop file in both the user file. There are 2 users on this system. There's one this is just a non-privileged user, and then there's an administrator user. And both of them have flags on their desktop files, or desktop folders, which are worth different amounts of points. Now, if you wanted, you probably could type commands in here just to get the flag, just to print the flag out using the type command. But I'm going to go through getting the administrator flag using privilege escalation and reverse shells and all that jazz. So the first thing we need to do is, it's a bit tiring typing all the commands into here. So what we need to do is we want to kind of get a reverse shell going. And so if you just go into here and if you just do a bunch of Googling and look up, SQL shell, PowerShell reverse shells, you can probably find a bunch. Now, if you just Google PowerShell reverse shell, this one-liner is the one that I found would work well. So if you just copy this here and maybe get another, hang on, where am I? And the one we want here is shell.ps1 for a PowerShell thing. And there's a few things we want to change because we've got different IP addresses to the one specified. Now, for some reason, this took a bit of trial and error, but for some reason, you've got to change pwd.path to just pwd. Otherwise, it won't run on the other machine. That took a bit of trial and error to figure out. There are probably other shell code. There's probably other reverse shell programs you can get to work that won't require that modification, but that's just what worked for me. Again, none of this is a complete linear process that you should know from start to finish. This took me a fair bit of trial and error and a bit of research, and that's completely normal for these styles of challenges. First of all, we're going to be using port 443 to come back. That's just an arbitrary choice. The reason is we're going to be using port 80 for something else at the same time, so it's just useful to change the port. And also the IP of our local machine we can get from the HackTheBox website. So we are currently, our IP on the starting point network is 10.10.14.27. And so if we change our code to this, that should connect back to us. Sure. And now we need to actually get this PowerShell command to run on the system here. And the way we need to do, there are several ways of doing this, but the best way I found to do this was first thing you can do is you can host what I like to do is I like to host a web server on this machine where you can access files from it, and then from the machine we're trying to break into, have a file that downloads the file from it. So the simplest way is to use Python, and it's got a module built in, HTTP server, and port 80, and this just runs a, hang on, -m. And this just runs a web server from this directory. So if you navigate to my IP and then /PowerShell or /shell.ps1, then you should be able to access the shell from there. And another thing we'll do, and we also want to set up a Netcat Listener to get commands back from the shell when it gets executed. So you do that. So you do that with the command. And then 443, which is the one we're listening on. And this will just sit here listening any outside communication coming back to it, which will be the server in a bit. And so once we've done that, we need to actually use the command to get the shell back to retrieve the shell from the server we're running. Now I didn't memorize this command. If you just look up, this is one of the commands you can find. It's an Xp Cmd Shell. And then the command we want to type is I'm not expecting you to copy it off the screen immediately because it's quite long, but if you Google around for this kind of stuff, it's one of the top results. And with any luck, this command should fetch the PowerShell script we've got hosted on our own machine and then execute it, which will send a reverse shell back to our machine with the listener we've got listening for any commands to get. So fingers crossed. Let's hope that worked. Yeah, and we got a connection. Great. So if we execute commands on here, yeah, I pressed enter. Oh, actually, yeah. If I pressed enter, that would have worked. But if I type, so now I've got a shell here, and I've just got access to everything to run commands on here. Now there are two flags of this challenge, as I mentioned earlier. If I type, who am I? This is the user I'm at. Now this user is not the administrator. There is a flag for getting the file in this user's desktop folder, but we want to kind of find a privilege escalation in here to get access to the administrator account. And there are several ways of doing this, but here's the way that I think is the best way. Now, when you're exploiting Linux boxes and you know that other people have been running commands that may have potentially private information in it, what you'd often do is you'd look at the home/bash history folder, which has all the commands in it. And so if you're doing any commands that have passwords in it, that might be there. Now, in Windows PowerShell, there's an equivalent folder, but it's a bit harder to find. Now, it's in users. Now, it's actually quite a long path, so you might have to look this up. CVC, that's our current user. Hang on. SVC, CD roaming. And now in this folder here, oh, hang on, this didn't work. Oh, I wasn't actually navigating at all there. So there should be hang on. I swear this has changed since I did it last. This always happens. Look, I've said it 100 times before and I'll say it again. It's a law of nature. Live demos never work. Sorry? App data, that's right. Hang on. That's right, yeah. Yeah, I missed one. It's not actually printing out any errors here, but so roaming. Probably should have caught that. For sure. And now in this folder here, there's a file known as console-host-history.txt, which contains the history of commands typed into PowerShell. And if we print that out using the type command, oops. And there's this interesting command here, netxe use archetype backups, and which is the name of the file that we saw in the SMB in the OpenSMB connection earlier. and it's saying user administrator, and the password, I guess, is megacorp admin, which is the password we can use to get access to the file, to get access to the admin's account. Now that we've got this file, I'm just going to open up another shell. Now, I said earlier that we're going to be using the impacket utils again. So there's a command, there's a program in here called psexec, which allows you to gain a privileged shell within the system, knowing their administrator username and password. And so the command here to type is IP, and now it's going to ask us for a password. And with any luck, this should be the right password here. And looks like we're in. Yeah, this is going a lot smoother than I thought it would, because I was struggling to get this working about an hour ago. Yeah, not that I'm complaining. There we go. Now we got think Swift type. Who am I? We're the admin, or the NT authority system rather. And now the flag here is located on the user's desktop, which I think is administrator. Right there is a variety of folders, and there's one called root.txt. And this hex string here is the flag, and if you enter that on HackTheBox, you'll get points for it. And that concludes the challenge.